What happens when you burn something?
Use it up.
Use it up.
Consume.
Consume. So we can go on to the next one, please. Very, very simple diagram. If you look at your professional quality of life, there are two sides. You can have compassion, satisfaction. What does that look like?
You feel good about what you've been doing and
Yeah.
it's all good.
You feel good about what you're doing.
You have energy to continue.
You have energy to continue. You like your coworkers. When you get up, you think, going to work, that's a good thing, that's okay. Compassion fatigue, what does that look like?
I'm shot.
Not quite yet. Burnout really is shock.
Don't really want to go to work.
You might not really want to go to work. What else?
Tired of helping people who won't help themselves.
Say that out loud.
Tired of helping people who won't help themselves.
Tired of helping
Yeah,
people
yeah.
who won't help themselves. Yeah, that is very specifically and clearly compassion fatigue. I have a couple of quotes. Just as I hold up my opera glasses, think about if you have ever had any of these thoughts yourself, because they're really common, or have heard a coworker say, there have been times when I thought people experiencing domestic violence should just get over it. I don't want to burden anyone with my work stories, plus they just don't get it. Why does he have to be on our team? We'd be better off with two of me. You know, I helped a lot of people today. What is wrong with her? She's only helped a few. No break for me. I can rest when I get home. Why does violence like this keep happening? How can God keep letting this go on? Or, oh, it's just a couple of drinks to help me sleep. Anybody ever have any of those thoughts? It's really common. It's really common once in a while to think, I know I myself have been guilty of, they need me, I'll do it, I'll rest next Tuesday, you know. Of course, I might have pneumonia next Tuesday, which did happen to me. You burn out, you run out. You may also hear colleagues say it. These are signs of compassion fatigue. When you work in a helping profession, if you volunteer in a helping profession after working a full-time job, it's really easy to get tired if you're not feeding the good stuff, if you're not feeding your emotional side. Very common. If you don't catch it when it's compassion fatigue, when it's the inability, what's the point of helping people if they won't even help themselves? It can turn into burnout. And then what's burnout, Bruce?
I'm shot.
I'm shot. I'm done. You can come back from compassion fatigue. You don't come back from burnout. Burnout's done. Done, done, done. I will share with you that one of the first responders who had been a teacher for 33 years, that's all she had done her whole life. So she was only in her mid-50s, right? She started teaching, she's fresh out of college, she's in her mid-50s, burned out after 32 years, tried to resign. They made her finish her contract that 33rd year, and she said, I was done. I didn't care about the kids. I didn't care. She said, I always cared, I was a really passionate teacher, and got burned out and didn't care anymore. So that was about 10 years ago. She's doing something else. I said, would you ever go back? She was like, no. She's still burned out 10 years later. She would never go back. Burned out is burned out. Done. Consumed. Secondary trauma, sometimes called vicarious trauma. Are you guys familiar with secondary or vicarious trauma?
I'll say it again.
Secondary or vicarious?
Vicarious.
Mm-hmm. So what can happen when you are working with people in crisis, in very intensive situations, and especially if it's for long term, is you can suffer what's called a secondary or vicarious trauma, which is you start to experience the trauma as though it's your own. So you start to have a low tolerance for the same things the victims have. So if you talk to victims of domestic violence, you'll very often hear that they can't tolerate violent movies. They can't. They can't watch it, they can't take it. And as I'm going from shelter to shelter, there's almost always one counselor in the group who can't tolerate violent movies, just can't take it. They're both relegated to only certain Disney movies that have no violence, and there are very few of those, right? Really hard.
Not such a bad idea, actually.
Maybe. Maybe. You know, I'm a big believer in choice and free will. And if you're a stable, healthy person, watching a violent movie is not going to spur you to do anything bad. I don't particularly find it enjoyable for, you know, Quentin Tarantino's too much for me. But if there's violence as part of the storyline, I can tolerate it, that's okay if I like the story. I'm talking about they absolutely get up and walk out of the room if there's a fight scene in a movie that is not overridingly violent. They can't tolerate that a little bit. There's experiencing secondary trauma. You can come back from that as well. It's a form of compassion fatigue. You can, if you recognize it, you can take a vacation, remove yourself from the traumatic situation and get yourself back to your grounded, stable situation. So the training for these trainings, one of the women was from the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence who actually put this together. In her shelter, a supervisor made a counselor take a 2-week vacation, 2 solid weeks, get out. Mandatory. Because she had compassion fatigue, she had vicarious trauma, and if she hadn't gone and taken 2 weeks to go and read a book and get her nails done, she was going to have burnout. You can come back from those things if you step away and do good self-care. That's the cure. Step away and take care of yourself to get yourself back to whatever your center is so you can return to helping people in crisis. If you're burned out, you can step away and live a different life doing something else because burnout's done. Okay? So that's the difference. Go to the next one, please. So, these are your symptoms. Like I said, you can't let go, avoidance, and reliving the trauma. So if you're avoiding, for instance, movies with any violence at all, and you have not been a victim of violence, now you might just not like it, but you can sit through it. But if you're flat out, can't take it, have to run out of the room, you might have a little vicarious trauma, right? Burnout, you're unhappy, disconnected. So if we go to the next one, please, Bruce. Oh, no, sorry. I sometimes get the 2 trainings mixed. There's a different slide for our domestic violence advocates. I'll just talk to it for you guys. If you have somebody that works with you, who used to go to lunch with you guys all the time, and now is avoiding that, is always too busy to go out with you guys, or you have, you know, whatever, Friday night, everybody gets together for a drink after work, and that person doesn't come anymore, and when you say, hey, we haven't seen you for a little bit, is everything okay? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm really just too busy, right? Kind of generalized, not as specific, you know, well, the kids need this, or my husband said whatever. And it's ongoing, they might be burning out. Because burnout, you'll start to separate. You don't want to be with your coworkers anymore. It's not the usual level of dissatisfaction if you overall like your job, but you know, that one person bugs you, or you hate that the copier always jams, whatever, that's normal. But when you wake up and say, oh my God, if I have to go there one more day, I'm going to take hostages and go to the bridge, you're in a bad place. You can't go back from that. So that, does that make sense, the difference? We tend to recognize it in others before we recognize it in ourselves. If you see a coworker who seems to be experiencing compassion fatigue or maybe moving towards burnout, it's okay to say, hey, you know, just reach out. Really, you all right? You're not seeing yourself. See if they'll open up. See if they'll talk. See if they'll talk to their supervisor, because that's really the most helpful, because that's when they can arrange to be put on vacation, because you need to step away. Right? This, it's really hard to see here. It's so light. You guys have a full scale version in the back of your pamphlets. This Lipsky Vandermoot, she did a really extensive study of trauma and trauma responses, both among staff people who work with trauma victims and the trauma victims themselves. And she found with the staff, in particular, that those who had high exposure to trauma, who, for instance, are first responders who perhaps worked down in the pit immediately after 9/11 and for the weeks and months following, or domestic violence advocates who were in the shelter and may experience and observe a tremendous amount of man's inhumanity against man, that they can develop some. I would think we'd be hard pressed to find a person who would have all of these responses and still be able to function in the world. But you may find increased anger and cynicism, right? So if you hear a domestic violence counselor, or really any mental health counselor saying something like, well, that's because all men suck. Okay, that's a little cynical.
Oh.
And not realistic, and they're probably not doing good work with their clients, because that's a really bad message, right? So if I hear a coworker saying that, I'm yanking them and saying, we need to talk for a minute. You're having a problem. These are unhealthy responses. Some of them may feel protective, but really, the way they manifest harms the person feeling them and also those around them. Okay? So if you guys, you can look at the ones in the back of your books or look at the ones here. What I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, take a look at these responses and either comment on some of them that you have experience with yourself or somebody you work with, or let me know of any questions, because really, very often people will say, well, how does hypervigilant manifest or diminished creativity? What would you say? So if you guys would take a look and then just either, share what you can or ask any questions. It's cold. Teresa.
The one at the top, feeling helpless and hopeless.
Yeah.
One of the best definitions I've seen of depression is, includes those words. It's something, a cocoon that wraps its victims in a cycle of hopelessness and helplessness.
Yeah.
So to me, that right there would indicate somebody that was showing depressive symptoms.
Absolutely. Hopelessness and helplessness are definitely manifestations of depression, right? Very typically, somebody is clinically depressed. You'll see behaviors that we associate with despair. They kind of give up, right? Everything is hard. Everything is too hard for the truly depressed person to do. They're exhausted. It's exhausting. So if you are a first responder or domestic violence counselor, though, and you're feeling that helplessness and hopelessness as a response to the trauma you've been exposed to, you're identifying too closely with the people you're helping. And so your situation feels hopeless, or helping them feels hopeless. One of the counselors said to me today, just sometimes when the client leaves and goes back to her abuser, I think, okay, see you next year. Cynical and hopeless. So what we spoke about was the fact that you could say that, and it could be true, because typically people who are in abusive relationships, it takes 7 to 10 times before they leave for good, if they do. But you also could look at it as, okay, I'll see you next year, because that's another opportunity for you to get safe. You know we're here, you know you can reach out to us. It doesn't have to be hopeless and cynical.
So what do you say when the person goes back?
We say, okay, can you talk to me about how you came to that decision? And listen to what they say. And we explore with them if they have explored all of the potential
But
outcomes.
you don't argue.
Pardon me?
You don't argue with them.
No, it's these are grown-ups, it's their decision. We do explore, we talk about, okay, well, when you came here, here's what happened. How can you keep that from happening again if you go back?
What do you expect?
And we talk about safety plan. Okay, I understand you feel you need to give it another try. It's your life. I support you. I respect that. Let's talk about, just in case things go off the rails again, how we can keep you safe. We safety plan. So typically, we encourage victims who are going back into an abusive relationship to keep an emergency bag, change of clothing, some money if they can, a cell phone with a charger, car keys if they have access to a car, in a place where the abuser will not find it or know about it. It could be in a neighbor's house, it could be in the bushes behind the neighbor, it could be, someplace not inside the house, but where they can access it and get away to get safe. We talk about keeping all documentation that they need, the children's papers as well as their own copies of them. We safety plan with them. I spoke to you guys about what we're really trying to do is help you recognize, understand what a person who's in an abusive relationship may be going through. Recognize what some of the red flags may be, and if you see them, offer them this additional support, right? And the reason we do that, as opposed to, get in their face and get in their way and say, don't do this, you're getting hurt, come on, is because these are adults and they have to make their own decision. I don't know about you guys. I don't want to be responsible for somebody else's life's decision. I don't have trouble with my own, It's not up to me. I can look at it and I can say, wow, I'm really scared for this client. I feel scared sometimes when I hear somebody's going back into a very abusive relationship. Safety plan like crazy with them. I explore as much as they are able to tolerate it, what's behind that decision. I'm very, very careful to make sure they understand I don't judge it because it's their decision. Because I want them to know if they run into that situation again, they can come back. They can get safe again. And I want them to not feel ashamed because they're not doing anything wrong. I want them to feel comfortable to call if they need to. Very important.
So they mustn't feel judged.
Absolutely no judgment. Not only must they not feel it, I must not judge them. It's not my place.
That's difficult.
You
For
know,
you.
it depends. I truly don't feel judgment for somebody being victimized. It's not their fault. Where I have difficulty with abusers, not judging. I'm working on it. Because they have their own issues, right? As a counselor, if I
If
end
they
up working
decide
with
to
someone,
go back into that situation,
that's what they need to do.
7 to 10 times?
7 to 10 times. That's the average.
I can't quite get my head wrapped around that.
That's a lot. And it's more if you consider that there are people who do leave after that first incident. That means there are people who wait 15 to 20 times.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. Everybody's different. What people can tolerate is different. What people will accept is different. What people need is different. Right? So, yes.
Is there a point where you would just call the police because the situation's too violent?
No. The victim has to do it. The victim. If she's with me and she's safe but she's going back, I can't call the police and say, oh my God, he's so abusive. Could you stay outside of her house? You want to. I get it. Can't. And I will tell you that if a victim calls, the first question is, are you in a safe place that you can talk? When the answer is no, so do you have to go, is it dangerous right now? Yes, hang up and call 911. Call me back when you're safe. They have to call. They have to. Right? The point of this is not to re-victimize the person by controlling them, even out of wanting to help them. Because if you look at all of the things we discussed, we look at the fact that the abuse comes out of one partner's intention and desire to control and have power over their partner. Am I helping if I decide to exercise authority over them and power over them and control them? I'm doing the same thing, even if it's from the best of intentions. Right?
I have a question. How do you draw that line? Like, there could be a lot of people, a lot of situations, marriages, relationships, where a woman or a man woman says, no, that's not going to happen again. If you do that again, I'm gone. And that person stops. Or is that typical person like a biting dog? You let them out, and then they let them nip, and then before you know it, they bite, or a bully. Are they all the same category, or as a rule?
Well, so you spoke about a few different things. Those are different categories. It's a great question. I've never come across a situation where the victim says, if you do it again, I'm out of here, and the abuse stops. It'll stop for a while. And then the victim, because they're so stupid and annoying, does something that just makes the abuser hurt them again, and then what they say is, well, I wouldn't have had to do that if you weren't so stupid and annoying. These are the conversations you hear. So if it stops it for a while, but it doesn't ever stop it permanently. I've never heard of that happening. As far as likening it to a bully, what I'll say is, that comes up very frequently. It seems like bullying, but I'll tell you, one of the groups I was in, one of the best responses to that did not come from me, it came from another first responder who said, you know, it really seems much more like terrorism. And the truth is, it really is the victim being terrorized in their home by the abuser. Right? So it's like bullying on steroids.
But if you stop a bully dead or in his tracks, or a dog, you know, from mouthing and going on to become a fighter, so you're saying generally then the person that's being the abuser will not, they
They
will
won't.
not
No,
stop.
so here's the thing about abusers and stopping the abuse. Change really occurs. Change occurs when whoever is doing the changing has hit a point where the situation as it exists has become intolerable for them. That's true of any change, right? So think about your own life and think about the times you tried to make changes and when you were successful and when you weren't. Typically, we don't want to make change until we don't like what's going on so much so that to continue doing it negatively impacts us somehow. Then we try to make the change and it's really hard. So I'm going to share that I was a nail biter my whole life and I, became embarrassed because people were like, that's gross, and it was, it's gross, right? And you get sick more because your hands are always in your mouth, it looks disgusting, that's fine. And also I was like a really, really voracious nail biter, so I bit till I bled and it hurt. It was painful. I finally decided I couldn't take it anymore. It was disgusting and it hurt. And it took me 4 years. 4 years to stop biting my nails. The last, 2 years, I only allowed myself to bite my thumbnails. I let all the other nails grow out. It took me that long and I really wanted to. And I really hated it. Change is hard. Change is hard. You really have to work at it. So if you're an abuser who doesn't think you need to change, you're not going to. Our batterers intervention programs, there is about a 5% self-referral, 5% of people who say, I don't like this, I want to change it. There is about a 5% success rate. People who want to change can if they work really hard, and it can take, maybe not as long as me, but it can take a long time. People who don't want to change, it doesn't matter what you say to them. If you look at our recidivism rate in our jails, that should tell you that if people don't want to change, it doesn't matter what you do to them. They won't change. It's a great question. Unfortunately, the answer is that people don't change unless they want to.
No, I'm just trying to decipher the difference in how many relationships could have been abusive, but they just, when they first punch or slap or whatever, or what have you, or verbal abuse, that they just walk, when the other party walks out.
Well, if the party walks out and the other party doesn't chase them down and kill them, then it would end the abuse for that relationship. The thing is, so here, we didn't really talk about this. I'm so sorry about that. Because of the time, I tried to get in as much as I could. But here's the thing about abusive relationships. Abusive relationships are not all bad in most cases. In most cases, there are good times and bad times. In most cases, there are periods where there is an abuse, or at least overt abuse going on. And when people fall in love with somebody, it's hard. You don't just say, well, that was bad, so I'm out of love. You can still love that person and even hate the behavior, hate the hurting behavior. And so we used to work with, in addition to that power and control wheel that you have, we used to work with what's called the cycle of abuse, right? So the cycle of abuse was a theory that was that there were 3 specific phases to domestic violence relationships. So it starts in the honeymoon phase, right? We meet somebody, we're dating, they like us, we like them, it's all fun, fantastic. And then it goes into what's called the tension building phase. And the tension building phase is when you hear people say, well, I always felt like I had to walk on eggshells. I was always really nervous. I was afraid if I stepped out of line, then there would be an explosion, blah, 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 right? And then there is the explosive phase, which is typically the physical assault, but it can also be a horrendous verbal assault and emotional abuse. So for many years, this is what we worked with. It's not true. We don't really use it anymore because it's not true. Not all abusive relationships have all 3 phases. But many, many do. It's very, very common, and it's very uncommon to hear from somebody who's been abused in a relationship, it was never good. From the very beginning. From the very beginning, he treated me like crap, and I just hung around for it because, I deserved that. even people who really think they deserve it, they like to be wooed on that first date. They like to be told, oh, you're so nice, I like you, right? So typically it starts out, there are good things there. And what happens is the victim is constantly trying to get back to that good place. So if you're trying to get back to that good place and you love that person now because you've seen good things in that person, and they're telling you, well, if you didn't do that, I wouldn't have to do this. If you would straighten up and fly right, we'd be okay. Then you start trying to straighten up and fly right and everything will be okay. But what happens is the abuser keeps moving the bar. You're never successful because no matter how good you are at meeting their requirement, they change the requirement. And if you're too good at meeting the requirement, they will sabotage you. They'll stick their foot out and trip you. That's the dynamic of the relationship. So it's very unusual. I won't say it never happens, but I'll tell you, if I went on a date with somebody and they did something really horrible on that first date, they would never see me again. And it wouldn't turn into a domestic violence relationship. And that's why that is the way that is. Other questions? So getting back to the good self-care. So these are some things that you might exhibit or might see other people exhibit. If you have been overexposed to trauma, if you are in a compassion fatigue cycle, and you just want to be aware so you can move out of it. Take a break, go to a movie, see friends, take care of yourself, you know. Are we done? Are we done? I'm almost done. We're almost done. We're almost done at the very end. So burnout we've spoken about. Let's go. Who's at risk? Here's what I'm going to say. Pretty much everybody. It's going to happen to anyone. So you always want to attend to good self-care. Next. Be resilient. We have a film. I'm going to skip it. I'll tell you what the guy in the film said. There are three major things that go into resilience. So there's internal strength, your personal strength. There is purpose, and there's pleasure. And what builds resilience is doing. So he talks very much about bicycling and playing tennis and getting out and walking. And what I will say is, in studies, moderate to severe, not mild, moderate to severe, clinically depressed people benefit more from a half hour of brisk walking than antidepressant medication. Because it changes your brain chemistry, changes the connection in the brain. So if you want to be resilient, move, do something, but also do things you love. Do what you love. So if you love to walk or run or play tennis or play softball or frisbee with your friends, do it. Make sure you get out and do it. But if that's not your thing, do something else, something active. Now, that doesn't mean don't do other things you love. I love to read, and that is a resilience builder for me. It's peaceful, relaxing, it centers me, so that's good. But I also make sure that I'm doing physical things. Really, really important if you want to build resilience. So what are some things? Just real quick 2 seconds, I know we're at the end. What are some things people do for good self-care to build resilience, or that you can do? Exercise.
Spend time with friends.
Spend time with friends, huge one. Huge, huge, huge. Social supports, really important in building resilience. And it feels good to spend time with friends, right? Perfect. What else?
Meditation.
Meditation is an excellent, excellent one. Very good for grounding, for feeling peaceful and centered. Love meditation. What else?
Try to learn something.
Learning. Absolutely. Great resilience builder. It keeps your mind active, keeps your body active. It can be a silly thing. I like to sing, right? Sometimes I used to sing in front of audiences. I don't do that anymore, but I will sit in my apartment for 2 hours and sing. It's physical. You're singing properly, you're using your diaphragm, you're using muscles, you have to stand a certain way. For me, it's also emotional and can be spiritual. Great resilience builder. So it can be, like that's kind of silly sitting in your house singing by yourself, but works for me. So it's what works for you. What's really important is doing it, finding the time to do it. What the gentleman in the film talks about is the fact that on a rainy day, we don't really feel like getting up and going and jogging 2 miles, even though we know that's going to build our resilience. But it's money in the bank. The days that we don't feel like contributing to our resilience are the days we need to. They're the days we need to get ourselves moving. Because on another day where we really can't, we're going to feel better and find out we really can. It builds it. So it's something you want to attend to every day. I think there might be one more slide if you don't mind. No, let's pass that. We've got that. We've got that. That's in your books. This is it. This is the end. Thank you. I just want to
Catherine,
thank
thank
you.
you.
If you will be so kind, the last page in your booklet is a closed survey. And right behind that is a training eval. If you will be so kind as to fill them out, just thinking of that, I really appreciate it. Appreciate your time and your contribution to the training so much. Thank you. Thank you.